Hi folks, with Tassless today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of market forces, or rather lack of market forces, when it comes to real estate, or certainly in Australia. The market forces that used to exist, and there were two sort of factors. One was what could people afford to pay for mortgages and rents, and the rents and mortgages had to reflect what the local population could afford to pay. Why would you price it beyond the reach of the people that you're trying to attract as customers? And the other thing was the amount of time that a property owner, whether they're renting it or selling it, would hold out for a better price or at the asking price and so on. Why? Because in market forces, if you can't get a result, reasonably quickly within a reasonable time frame, you lower the price until you get you get a buyer or get a renter to come in, and that's kind of how it was. Now, certainly when I was a young guy, I used to get because this is pre-internet, of course. I used to get the newspapers and I would mark off the properties for rent that I was interested in. And I'm like, I don't know, 21 or something at the time, and then I would get next week's paper and look at the ones that hadn't rented that were still there. And then say the third week, and definitely by the fourth week, I could pretty much call up and just make an offer and get the place. Sometimes you didn't have to do that. You call up and I'm interested in seeing the property down the road, and the estate agent would say, "Oh, we're prepared to cut a deal. If you're prepared to offer X." So a property that might start at $50, for example, might start at $50 a week. And that was furnished back in the day. You could get that for $35 a week if it had been out on the market sort of for a few weeks or a month. Property owners at the time were ever ready to cut a deal, and they wanted a rent-paying tenant in there as quickly as possible. They didn't even want to go a week or 2 weeks without a rent-paying tenant, and so they became very motivated to cut a deal. And it's better to get a tenant in that was paying some rent than collect no rent at all. And that was very much the calculus that went on. So, and there were other things. We a furnished apartment, and I said, "Well, I don't want the furniture." And all right, then, well, and they charge you, $5 a week less or something for the furniture. Is basic, by the way. It wasn't like fully furnished to a high standard. And that's okay. Well, someone will come and take the stuff away, and they never did. No one ever turned up. It was more expensive for them to put it in storage than it was to give a reduction in the rent. So a $25 a week rent could be $20 and furnished. So this is going back some time, as you can appreciate. But this was the thing, and the same went for selling a house. Owners didn't wait too long to cut the price, and I remember my folks bought a house that was on sale for $28,000 back in the day. Nice house, actually. $28,000, and it hadn't been up for very long, and the owners were motivated to sell, and so they took it was $25,000, so they're effectively taking 10% off, and that's not a tiny reduction. It's not like a couple of bucks off. It was a decent reduction, but such was the attitude around the place at the time. And I knew people, friends of mine from school, where their parents maybe had one or two investment properties and they wanted to sell one. And again, they were motivated to get a result. The idea of leaving it on the market indefinitely was something that didn't even appear on the radar. Such was the effect of market forces. However, things have completely changed. Market forces in real estate no longer apply, whether it be rental or mortgages or buying. The same as market forces don't apply when it comes to hiring labour. There are people who are complaining till they're blue in the face. They can't find factory workers and labourers and people like that, but they steadfastly refuse to respond to the market conditions, which is, if you pay a bit more, you'll get someone. If you offer better working conditions, you'll get somebody. Maybe you offer, free breakfast and lunch, or kind of whatever, because that's all taxed up. And do what you got to do to get the results you want. But they absolutely refuse to do it. No, I'm paying the minimum of the minimum of the minimum, and that's it. And I'm going to whinge and bellyache and complain that I can't find workers, but I'm not going to fucking respond to the market. Fuck the market. I'm going to lobby the government to bring in more third world peasants. That'll fix it. Yeah, okay. Now, I raise this now because there's a house, a freestanding house, nothing particularly fancy, but it's a freestanding house, and the owner wants top dollar rent, and it's not in a good location, and I think it's tending to the shabby side, I think, and the guy wants absolute top dollar. So it's a 3-bedroom, very basic 3-bedroom. Now for a 3-bedroom house that's brick, fully renovated, nice, quiet, tree-lined street, and all that sort of stuff, you can get, and I'll just use round numbers here to illustrate the point. You can get $100 a week, say, in the rent, but only highly spec'd, top of the town shit. This guy wants $100 a week for what, by comparison, is very ordinary, very shabby place. I don't think it's had a reno or remodeling for 20 years, longer, 30 years, and it's not in a quiet tree-lined street, far from it. So, in on relative basis, the guy can only realistically ask for $70 a week, not 100 that he's asking for. Maybe even 70 is sort of optimistic. But he's left it vacant and empty for just on 8 months now. And why? And he's hopped around to different real estate agents to shift it. But the guy's obviously not motivated. Hasn't dropped the rent. Now, on top of that, given that the rentals in the area for 3-bedroom freestanding houses have gone up by 10% or so, he's increased the rent from 100 to 110 for something that he can't shift even at 100. So why? Now, he's not alone. I mentioned that because it sort of came up on my radar over the last few days. But this is pretty much how things are at the moment. No one's dropping the rent. There was a little bit of we'll give you the first week for free during the height of COVID. There was a bit of that, but only for the concrete jungle inner city apartments that the Chinese and Indians were renting, and a lot of those guys have gone home. So that's it. But nonetheless, there were almost entire apartment blocks that were empty with no tenants in there, but the rent was never reduced. In fact, again, anything had increased. Now, a lot of the real estate companies now, advisory companies and companies at statistics and all this sort of thing, they come out with monthly things of this is the rent you can get in your area, and it's constantly going up. Owners of property are constantly being exhorted, so you can increase the rent by $5 a week, and you can increase the rent by $1 a week, constantly pressuring them to that you can get more. You can get more for this. And so a lot of these people, the constant push to increase rents all the time and across the board, even in places that are like 150, 200 kilometers outside of Sydney, they're doing it. But anyway, this is the owned property owners are prepared to leave the property empty for months, a year, longer than a year. No tenant paying rent. Now, that's a huge change from how it used to be. I know people that owned property, and I'm renting properties myself as a young guy. I bought a house at how old was I? About 25 or 26 when I bought my first house. But this idea of I bought a block of land, and the guy had bought the block of land 7 or 8 years earlier, and there was no capital appreciation on it. He was selling it for what he paid for it, so he made no money at all. And I bought that block of land, and as soon as I came along and said that I was interested in or could be interested in, the guy almost jumped all over me, and he, without me even having to put the slightest bit of pressure on him, he dropped a couple of $1,000 off the price just straight away, just in the first phone call. And that was how it was then, all across the board, whether it's land or buying houses or rentals. I think every rental that I ever inquired about, like the real estate agent or the owner, depending who it was, it straight away said, "Well, I'm prepared to take a price. I'm prepared to take $10 off, or this or that, or prepared to give you such and such or so and so." There's one place where it didn't have a garage, and the guy said, "Look, I own another property down the road, and it comes with a garage, but the people aren't using it. You have that garage for free if you want." These sorts of things. They were throwing added value, reducing the rent, just offering all sorts of things that today you just don't see. And again, hundreds and thousands of apartments, houses, like this place that the guy was, and they're all staying empty. So clearly there are no market forces at work here, which is where I'm going with this essay. There are no market, because if market forces apply, then people have to have tenants. You got to go to tenant if market forces, and you lower the rent. And if you can't get people to pay $100, you drop it to 90, and then to 80, and then to 70. You keep on going, which is how it used to be, by the way. You keep on going until you can get someone in, a tenant to pay rent, or until you get someone to buy your house. This is very new. This thing of saying, "No, I want $100, and I don't care if it takes a year or 2 years or however long it is. I'm hanging on. I'm staying at that $100. That's it." That's someone who's not responding or in any way subject to market forces. And we need to ask ourselves, why is that? Because market forces, when they're not applying to any buying and selling situation, mean that the whole mechanism of exchange, market exchange, is corrupted and fucked and screwed and not in operation. And this is something I think we need to really look at. Why is it not in operation? Why do the owners of property not need tenants? Why do they hold out for the top dollar rent? And again, prepared to leave the apartment empty or the house empty for a year or longer than that. Why is that so? Why are they prepared to? There's a house not far from here, actually, down the road. I knew the owner. I mean, she'd inherited the house, but she wanted $1.2 million for it, which was above the spec for that sort of house on a shitty block of land like that. But she said, "No, I'm not going to drop it by a cent," and she just held on to the price until some Chinese buyers came along and bought it. And the way their attitude to money was, they had fuckloads of money to burn, so they were just money laundering. They weren't actually buyers looking for value or something like that. So this is a real issue, because again, whenever you're exchanging goods and services in a marketplace, or buyer and seller get together, the market forces must apply. They need to apply. And if they don't apply, then we're looking at a very corrupted mechanism of exchange. And I think we need to look more closely at this. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.